Christian is an 8-time, let me repeat, 8-time Grammy winner. In all kinds of categories, globally recognized double bass superstar, composer, producer, turn page, and band leader. It seems like he's worked with everyone. I just want to read some of the names because we only have a moment. Here are a few: Freddie Hubbard, Sonny Rollins, Ray Brown, McCoy Tyner, Chick Corea, who I saw Christian play with in 2019, Herbie Hancock, Pat Metheny. Christian's also artistic director for a number of organizations, including the New Park Jazz Festival, the National Museum in Harlem, and Jazz House Kids. And because he has a lot of time on his hand, he radio hosts Jazz Night in America on NPR. I'll stop there.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure because I didn't even know my number was in their Rolodex. So how Stephen reached out to me to do this, it's a big pleasure on many ends. So
thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Can you do me a favor before we do anything?
Yes.
Can you explain, since this is being recorded, you need to explain to everyone about this hat.
So, everyone's here from Toronto. So I noticed that Christian likes to wear hats, watch a lot of stuff with Christians, and I was just like, you're gonna meet with the guy, and he meets a lot of people, and will probably forget you. But maybe there's a way for him to remember you. And so I thought I would get him one of my favorite designs of the Blue Jay logo, and just so he knows it's his, I had them embroider his name on the side of it. So for those who know he's a Philly fan, if anyone back in Philly sees this,
I'm going to get in trouble.
We don't apologize for 92. And
93, but
93. Yeah. Well, 92 season, right? And, we appreciate you giving it to us.
It's such a kind gift. I must accept it. But I mean, don't get me in trouble. I saw Christian McBride with a Blue Jays hat on, and I'll never be allowed in my hometown ever again. But this is very sweet. Thank you.
My pleasure. I'm looking at the crowd scanning, and fortunately, there's a lot of jazz people here, and so that means that I probably don't need to jazz nerd it out as much as I'd like to, because they'll help me with the questions.
Go for it.
But for people who are just getting to know you, do you want to start off with just how you started playing bass?
Bass is a family tradition. Both my father and my great uncle are bass players. My father got me into playing the bass, and my great uncle got me into jazz. So between the two of them, that's how I got started. I was 9 years old when I got my first electric bass, and I fell in love with it. And when I got to middle school, my mother saw that I was getting serious, and she said, well, it's time for you to go to a school that has a good music program. So I went to a place called Pepper Middle School in Southwest Philadelphia, and that's when I started playing the double bass. And things just kind of happened after that.
Was at the school, was your focus jazz or was it classical?
There was no jazz. This was middle school, so this was just playing in the orchestra and getting private lessons.
And then what switched you on to jazz? Or I shouldn't even say what switched you on to jazz. What were you playing at the time? And what were the different, genres of music you were touching that led you eventually down this path?
Yeah, well, I mean, like most, between ages of 9 and 11, you either play classical music in school, or you play what's on the radio, you play what was popular. And that's what I was doing. When I started playing the electric bass at age 9, I would just listen to the radio and try to copy as many bass lines as I could, and listen to a lot of my mother's R&B records. So there was a lot of James Brown, a lot of Motown, a lot of Aretha Franklin. So really the music that's my bone marrow, as I call it, is classic soul. And then once I started playing the double bass, my great uncle got me into jazz. He brought me over to his house one day and said, now that you're playing the upright bass, it's time for me to turn you on to the legends. So he gave me a crash course in the history of jazz bass. He played, Ray Brown, Paul Chambers, Charles Mingus, all the great ones. And after that one visit, I was pretty much into jazz.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you end up on Juilliard. Why? At what point were you like, okay, it's now we're gonna go continue with this and we're gonna keep studying and get better? Apparently, you're really good.
I fooled a few people. Well, during high school, I was playing a lot of classical music. I was playing in the Philadelphia Youth Orchestra, which is pretty much like almost everyone that comes out of the Philadelphia Youth Orchestra winds up getting a gig with a major symphony somewhere. And so I was playing in that. I was playing in the Temple University Youth Chamber Ensemble, which really didn't have a bass, it's not really a bass in chamber music, but they put me in there. So I was playing what little chamber music there was for bass and just playing cello parts. So I was getting a lot of, my classical chops were very strong in high school. And I wanted to go to New York. At some point I realized that while I was playing a lot of classical music, my heart was in jazz. I was really focusing on that. And I realized that all of my jazz heroes lived in New York. So I moved to Juilliard. I moved to New York to go to Juilliard, but deep down inside, I went to Juilliard just so I could be in New York, so I could be near all my jazz heroes.
Amazing. And so what was the experience like? Because you don't really spend much time there.
Right.
Yeah.
I was there for a year, and my experience at Juilliard was incredible. I learned a lot. I had a great bass instructor, the late, great Homer Minch, and Otto Werner Mueller was the conductor of the Juilliard Orchestra, the Juilliard Symphony, and I played under him, and I had a wonderful time. But I started working a lot while I was in school, and I met Roy Hargrove, and Roy and I started hanging out a lot and playing together. And by the end of the school year, the writing was on the wall. I was either going to have to go back for my second year and really focus or concentrate on getting gigs. It was too difficult to try to juggle both.
Yeah. And so, for you, kind of being in New York, it's it's different for people who are living outside of New York, right? So if you want to do jazz, you might have to go really work hard to find it. But in New York, you're probably just stumbling over it. What's the network that you start to build and start to create that helps to foster that next move for you?
Well, fortunately, growing up in Philadelphia, that's not very far from New York. It's less than 100 miles from New York. But I think in terms of opportunity and people who you can be in close proximity with, it's like light years apart. So when I got to New York, I knew a lot of musicians already. I knew Bobby Watson, I knew Wynton and Branford Marsalis, I knew Terrence Blanchard. I knew a lot of the musicians who were like the hot up-and-comers. So I tried to spend as much time around those musicians as I could. And, as I'm spending more time in the jazz scene and going to jam sessions and meeting musicians and getting more gigs, it just, things just sort of expanded. I like to think that my career's been pretty organic, because the only real goal I had was to get to New York and to play with all of my jazz heroes. And to play with my jazz heroes, you gotta find out what they like. You gotta see who the bass player is in their band at that time. Find out what they play that they like, that the band leader likes. And it's like a research project. You gotta be strategic in this. You know, I find there's so many young musicians that are like, you know, I can play, hire me. That's not enough. You know, you got to be very focused and specific in who you want to play with and why. I wanted to play with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. If I couldn't play with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, I would want to play with Freddie Hubbard. If I couldn't play with Freddie Hubbard, I'd want to play with Bobby Watson, who had a very hot band at that time in the late 80s. And Roy was playing some gigs with him. And it was just there was a long list of really working band leaders at that time. And I wanted to work with all of them. And I did it by learning their book, going to their gigs and researching what songs they're playing, and you know, the whole thing of, hey, I can improvise and I can walk a blues. Well, so what? A lot of people can do that, right? What separates you that makes that particular person want to hire you? So that's what I did. And being a bass player, I think my goals were, I don't think they were really that difficult to kind of see through, you know, because everybody needs a bass player. You know, same thing with drums. Everybody needs a drummer, you know. And like rhythm section players, I think have somewhat of you know, we get like one notch in terms of opportunity because everybody needs a rhythm section, you know. So if you're a vocalist or if you're a horn player, you might have to be a little more focused, a little more creative in how you want to get out there, you know. And it certainly is possible because you see young musicians like Ambrose Akinmusire or Theo Croker or Christian Scott, Chief Ajwa, as he's known now, Kamasi Washington. All of these horn players had apprenticeships, you know. So it can happen for horn players, but for me personally, my goals, in retrospect, they probably weren't that difficult to realize. They were very simple goals, but I was very determined to figure out how to make them happen.
If you were to replicate that right now, would you be able to? In terms of how the scene looks, how the scene looked in New York at that time, to how, maybe even just in general, the jazz scene now, what would you be trying to do right now if that was you, if you're coming onto the scene?
Well, it's so hard to imagine because if you're 18 years old right now and, you know, or if you're 17 years old right now and you're a senior in high school and you're about to graduate and you got these dreams in your mind, like I want to play with certain jazz musicians. Who are those jazz musicians? They can't be exactly the same people I wanted to play with because they're all dead. But
well, you stepped into that space.
Yes, that's scary. But yes, I think it can absolutely be done the same way today. Because the band leaders that are out there, I mean, we love seeing these really good young players coming on the scene. But I was one of those people that said, I don't want to just be a good player coming on the scene. I want to be a good player specifically for this band, you know. So I have very specific, very strategic ways of trying to get inside the scene. And that absolutely can be done now. Yeah. It just wouldn't be with the same people.
I know I've enjoyed seeing Kenny Garrett for a lot of the
That's the man.
Right? So there's always like a new crop of amazing guys that he's done. So it's been great to see where some of those guys have come through.
Yeah, Kenny Garrett is one of our great living legends, who's also somewhat of a neighbor. He doesn't live in Montclair, but he lives in Glen Ridge. They're right down the street.
So amazing. You know, you talked about playing, you want to be the best player for that music, for that band. And there's a lot of bands you've played with and a lot of artists that you've played with. And, you know, I think for me, when I was younger, one of the things that I first caught my attention listening to you last night was I saw you playing with Diana Krall, then I saw you playing with Sting, and I was just like, did they swap bands? You said it was just you that played. But what's, when you start to, for me, I used to play the tuba, and I played in a local band called the Hanford Street Youth Band. They were the bigger band, the silver band. I played horrible tuba, so then I moved to percussion because I could hit in time. But, the band leader used to always say, you put together the best Philharmonic in the world of players nobody wants to play with. So don't be a jerk, right? And
Right.
so when I see the list of people you've played with for as long as you've been playing, I have to assume, it might be the wrong assumption, but I don't think so because we've broken bread now. You're a sweet guy and people like having you in the room, even because, not just because of how well you play, but because of everything else you bring. I wonder if, because there's so many students here, just kind of touching on how important it is to be able to, not just, networking is one thing, but it's
Right.
another thing to have people want to spend time with you, right?
Well, thank you for those kind words. I feel that you should be exactly who you are. If it's not your general nature to be warm and fuzzy, that's totally okay. Because one of my favorite sayings is kindness should not be used as strategy. And I find that there's a lot of people that use kindness as strategy. I'm going to be nice to you until I get the gig. Then I'm going to be who I am. That happens a lot. And I think once you get to a certain point in your life, you can sniff a fake a long way away. And so I have always enjoyed being the class clown. I've always enjoyed, dad humor. I've always enjoyed the entertainment factor in music, something I think jazz has been sorely lacking for about half a century. We're so deep into our artistic greatness, we simply forget that the goal is for people to like the music, And but that's just me. There are a lot of musicians who are not class clowns, who are really fun people. The real goal is to not be. Don't be difficult to get along with. You are there to serve. You're there to serve. As a bass player, I'm not there to get solos. Nobody cares if I have fast chops. That's not why I got gigs. Other bass players get like, oh, you got such great technique. Like, so what? Sting didn't hire me because I had fast chops. Sting hired me because I could play the bass line. Bass players will get hired because they can play the bass line. And I see young bass players and, I'm trying to practice my triple slaps and, I'm sharing all this Victor Wooten stuff and I'm sitting there like, good luck, congratulations, But I would think, again, I think my goals were pretty simple. They were pragmatic. It was to work, to get your bills paid by playing with people who you enjoy playing with, people you admire, people who you could get something from. So my job was to serve. So as long as I went there with the attitude of not look how good I am, look what I'm bringing to your band. It was sort of like, what can I do to make this band better? I already knew the answer to that, but I wanted to make sure I was on the right page with whatever band leader I was working with. I remember I went to Japan with this was the most anticipated gig I've ever done in my life. Early 2003, I got a call from Herbie Hancock's manager and says, Herbie wants to know if you can go to Japan with him this summer. And the answer is yes. You don't ask when the dates are. You don't ask who's in the band. You don't ask how much is the gig pay. You say, yes, it's Herbie Hancock, right? And I said, yes, I absolutely will be there. I said, just out of curiosity, who else is in the band? She said, oh, it'll just be a trio, you and Jackie Jeanette. And I dropped the phone. I was like, what? You know, and so we get to Japan and, you know, we do our first rehearsal. I'm thinking, man, this is it. If I die after this tour, I'm good. You know, I get to stand in between Herbie Hancock and Jackie Jeanette. And so we did the first rehearsal. And now, you know, 2003, most people you see on my resume I had played with by then. So I was by no means a rookie. You know, I was not green. But after that first rehearsal, I went to Jackie Jeanette. I said, hey, Jack, was that cool? He said, was what cool? He's like, you know, like what I played. He's like, what? I'm just making sure, man, you know, this is like the ultimate good gig for me, man. I don't want to mess it up. He was like, get out of here, man. You're fine. He said, but I really appreciate you asking. You know what I mean? And I went and asked Herbie the same thing. But that really has been my attitude in every band I've ever played in. Is it cool? Do I need to do anything different? That, you know, if I'm doing something that doesn't quite fit, you let me know. Because I want the gig. I want you to call me again. You know, I want you to be like, oh, I can count on McBride to bring me his best. And if his best is not exactly what I want, I can tell him and he'll fix it. So that might be why I work a lot, because I realize my job is to serve first.
Yeah.
Like a letter carrier.
Oh, that's awesome. There's something I wanted to ask you about. Speaking of playing with people, so, you know, I was doing some research. I was learning this into going through YouTube, checking out videos, and then came across the tune in Tuscany, you know, September 11, right?
Right.
And I was like, man, you know, you get different moments in music where it's bigger, the music's important, but facilitates a bigger moment. And I was just curious what that was like. I don't know what the time zone was like for you in terms of when you get on stage, when everything was unfolding, but what was that experience like?
Oh, that was...
Oh, sorry, and actually, for people who don't know what I'm talking about, September 11, 2001, Christian McBride was getting on stage with Sting in Italy, and they just found out about what was happening. At I don't want to say the show was going to go on, but you guys still played, and to me, it's like looking at watching the show, and it's like, wow, heavy. Being, you know, obviously you're from Philly, but New York guy, all your friends in New York trying to figure out what's going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's an experience I hope none of us ever have to go through ever again. I mean, that was pure trauma. In Italy, it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were in the middle of sound check. And, you know, I think the first plane hit the first tower just before 9 a.m., or I can't remember, just before, right after 9 a.m. Anyway, we were on stage sound checking, and somebody from Sting's office came running out screaming. They're like, stop, 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 come inside. And so we all ran inside and we watched, you know, the second plane had just hit the second tower right as we were going into the room. So we didn't see the plane, we didn't see either plane hit, but we saw both towers burning, and you know, we just couldn't believe it. We were like, what are we watching? And so we're all sitting in front of the television in total shock. And then, of course, once the towers collapsed, we saw that. And there was just such a horrific gasp. and scream as there were in most homes that saw that. And one of our background singers, Janice Pendarvis, at that time her son was 9 and he went to school down in that area. So she was particularly freaked out. And now of course, mind you, this is 2001, so there was no Twitter, there was no social media yet. And so, obviously, and this concert was semi-private because it was a live recording. My first official gig with the band was kind of like, wow, you know. So Sting called an emergency band meeting and said, what do we do? Do we still play or do we cancel the concert? Now, of course, the problem is now it's 4 o'clock. The gig is in 3.5 hours. And, you know, if we cancel it, how are we going to get the message out to people? Because we weren't even in, you know, we were in Tuscany. So you gotta travel, like it's not really near, you know, I guess I can't remember, was it is Rome the closest city to Tuscany? I can't remember. But wherever you come from, you gotta drive to get there. So man, it feels cruel to cancel the concert, like people driving for hours and maybe they haven't heard about what happened in New York yet. And so if you see the documentary All This Time, Sting was very, his foresight, even in the middle of all of this trauma, I thought was pretty admirable because he told his cameraman to leave the tapes rolling. So he actually recorded our band meeting and put it in the documentary. And it was collectively decided that as artists, it is our duty to continue to perform because this will help us manage our trauma and the trauma of everyone who's coming. Even though it might be only temporary, this is our job. We are spiritual ER doctors, you know. So we decided that we would alter the set. Some songs we would take out, but we carried on with the show. And yeah, it was both grim and victorious, you know, because the people who did show up that night, they were very, very grateful that we decided to play because they all collectively decided that, hey, that's what we needed to help us get to this next stage, whatever that is. And it was the same thing for us, you know. And the good part about it was that that particular band, we're bonded for life, you know. We went through that together, you know. Sadly, a few of those musicians have already passed away. But yeah, man, you know, like even before that happened, Sting said, hey man, you know, I really like having you in the band. You want to stay? Because I was originally only supposed to go to make the record. This was supposed to be a one-off for me. And he said, hey man, I got some more dates for the rest of the year. You want to stay? I was like, yeah. And so I stayed in this band for another 2 years. Yeah. And we've been working together on and off ever since. You know, so something good did come out of that.
Yeah, I just saw a video of him at your Jazz House Kids.
Right, yeah.
You want to tell us a little bit about Jazz?
Sure, yeah. Well, you do the same thing, you know. In America, our educational system is putrid. It is absolutely putrid. I have no idea. Like, if you're a parent, particularly, I don't know what it's like here in Toronto, but if you're in America and you're a parent to a young kid, and you got to figure out where to send them to school, I don't envy You know, there's so much false information, really poor schools. The government doesn't really take care of the teachers, so like the teachers don't want to teach. And it's just, yeah, there's some serious mind games that go on in America. You know, they con you into thinking like, you know, they want everybody to be an individual. They want you to kind of, like phrases like thinking out of the box, individualism, which in America means you can make up your own truth, you know, speak your truth. Well, I don't know at what point in this world's history did the truth become a truth. It either is or it isn't, you know. And so like, there's so much, no one can get on the same page on what is actually accurate, false, worthy, not worthy, newsworthy. I mean, it's just, you know, you get 10 different angles on the same story, and meanwhile everybody's crazy, you know. But when it comes to an already faltering educational system, when the government decides that we need to take this money elsewhere, the first thing that goes always the arts programs. And so what's already bad gets worse. And so my wife, Melissa Walker, who is a Canadian, by the way. Edmonton, yeah.
Great singer.
Yeah, her dad played for the Eskimos. And so Melissa was called to do a masterclass for some kids in Newark, New Jersey in the early 2000s. And she said, what, and these were elementary school kids. These were like kids from ages 6 to 9 or something like that. There's no tougher crowd in the world than a bunch of 6 to 9-year-olds trying to talk to them about jazz. And Melissa said, this is either going to go incredibly well or incredibly bad, you know. And it turned out to be great. And she decided that her theme would be, how do you build an imaginary house using jazz tools? You know, so like, what's the foundation of the house? Like, what instrument would that be? And she had this whole thing worked out, and the kids loved it. And not too long after that happened, one of the big schools in Newark, New Jersey got rid of their jazz program, their music program. And a light went off in Melissa's head, like, I know how we rectify this, you know. So she started a nonprofit jazz education organization called Jazz House Kids. And when Melissa and I started dating over 20 years ago, she had just started it. Her focus at that time was still singing. She was still a working singer, and Jazz House Kids was sort of her side project. But somewhere along the way, the focus started to shift, and she didn't focus as much on singing as she focused on building the organization. And now that organization, 22 years in, has seen up to 100,000 kids from all across the state of New Jersey. We've now expanded our program into New York City. We have a 2-week summer program, which has a bunch of international students. We have students from the UK. We have a wonderful relationship, collaborative working relationship with a group in London called Tomorrow's Warriors, which, you know, another wonderful jazz organization, jazz educational organization in London, and Nubia Garcia, Shabaka Hutchings, they all came through that program. And so we do like an exchange every summer, and we have some students that come from South America, and I just couldn't be any prouder of what Melissa created with Jazz House Kids.
Awesome. I'll have to send my son down there at some point.
Please, please.
once he gets old enough.
How old is he now?
2. Oh, he's 3 tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
3 tomorrow.
Nice.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, he might be a little young.
yeah,
right now.
he come running around anyways.
You're right.
Yeah, that's awesome. Steve, how are we doing on time? Should we be taking questions yet?
20 minutes or so.
I got one more question before we'll take questions, because I know there's people who are chomping at the bit. This question is outside of the jazz space. It's more in
Great. I like being outside of the
yeah,
jazz space.
it's outside. And I had a thought. So recently, James Blake has been, making a lot of headlines.
Yeah.
And there's been a few different tweets that have been put out by him that have made me really think about, or I guess think about the music in a way, or in just this current state of things that I've never thought about before. And one of them had actually written down, and look at that, I'm actually using my notes.
Yeah, right.
I'll tell you what the quote is. So he had this one tweet that said, since it's cheaper to produce fast synthetic music and drop streaming every week to capitalize on the strength of the model, watch how the model is preparing you for AI-generated music that pays musicians nothing at all. And he's basically talking about whether it's Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, how you get rewarded really for the amount of the frequency to which you put music out, which really is humanly impossible.
That's right.
And so I guess there's a couple of questions in there, but really I'll just ask for your commentary on it, which is that, do you think AI coming into the space is just like any other technology and we'll figure out how to work with it, adapt with it? Or is there something different about AI that's presenting itself than technology has in the past? That would either, give you hope or scare you?
Yeah, I mean, I always try to be a glass half full person. Always try to look at certain things as opportunities. It's hard to think of the power of AI and not think that this is going to be some major spiritual doom.
Or awakening.
Or awakening. Like I said, I like to think of it like that. But there was a story that broke about a year ago where they started, Spotify started making playlists with fake bands. And they were AI bands. And because you would Shazam these groups and they would give you these names you didn't recognize. And everybody said, well, who is that? I never heard of that person. And jazz musicians were like, man, this person actually sounds pretty good. Who is it? They come up with these, really funny names okay, obviously this is somebody using a pseudonym, right? But they found out that some of this was AI driven. These were literal fake bands. And the absurdity is that you already don't get paid anyway from Spotify. So they're trying to save the money that they don't pay jazz musicians already.
Yeah.
They gotta come up with fake bands. Wow.
Or they're using the money they're not paying you to create this, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing, the other concept was, it hasn't been proven yet, that they would use certain anonymous musicians and they would pay them a flat rate to just, hey, just make us a bunch of tracks, we'll pay you a flat rate and you'll never hear from us ever again, and don't call us, we'll call you. And that's entirely possible as well. But I had a conversation with Sting about this. We just worked together recently, and I was traveling on the road, and I saw him in Seattle, and I hadn't seen him in a while, so we reconnected. And I happened to mention, I said, man, I saw your tour schedule. Man, you toured back in the 80s, dude. It's like, why is he working so hard? And people should understand that if you are really rolling like that, the really rich musicians don't work that hard. They can stay home and chill. So I said, man, you're working harder than I've ever seen. He was like, I have to. I said, why? He said, man, you can't make money selling records anymore. Sting said that. And I thought, well, damn. If Sting says that, there's no hope for anybody who's not a pop rock legend, you know? And, you know, he put it in the context. He says, you know, listen, yes, I'm fine. You know, I've made a lot of money in my publishing through the years, but it ain't like it used to be. You know, I can't just sit home for 4 years and do nothing. You know, we got to get out there and work. This is the only surefire way that you can make cold cash. Now, you got to get on the road and work. Now, that's always been the case for jazz musicians. But when I find that someone like Sting is even passionate about the pay structure for DSPs, and now you add AI in there, one of the issues with technology, and this is where the human race has to be very revolutionary, usually when things progress in terms of technology, the overall concept is that we can do less. We can get more sedentary. We can get dumber because there's something else out there that will do it for us, you know. I mean, I love audiobooks. I mean, I'm going back a little way because audiobooks are not a new thing, but like, you know, we grew up actually holding a book and reading it, you know. If you can't read, that's fine, because you can buy an audiobook, right? If you can't write a recommendation letter, no worries. You can't write a business form letter, no problem. Get AI to do it for you, you know. You don't know how to play a chord on the piano, that's fine, just. So you can do less, you know, like a lot of people who spent a lot of tedious moments learning those little tiny nuances. You don't have to do that anymore, you know. So it's up to the younger generation to really figure out a way to make technology work for us and not the other way around. You know what I mean? We don't want that dictating to us what we need to be doing as humans. You know, it should be the other way around.
Definitely.
Stay curious, stay hungry, stay smart. Don't let this technology make you lazy, you know? And Canada's different though. Like
We're not that far off. Yeah.
you probably, I mean, like, Toronto feels a little more American than most Canadian cities, maybe with the exception of Vancouver, but like, I've always loved coming to Toronto and just everything about Canada, because you know, you guys are just,
And those blue jerseys.
you're not, so don't start with that. You're friendly, you're smart, you're curious, you know. Americans get whiny. Americans are like, look at me, why are you not looking at me? Don't you know I'm special? Like, stop. You're yelling at me, you know, and so it's just, you can't get anywhere, you know? So, you know, keep doing the right thing.
There you go. Do we have, okay, yeah, yes.
Hey,
Sister one's gonna steal my glasses.
I am. It's always very fun, entertaining, and inspiring to listen to you, your interviews. I am Josephine, I am an artist, I'm a writer, and I was wondering, thanks. I was wondering, I'm kind of, I want to fight for artists, in general, the artist condition, and I'm trying to understand, as a professional artist who lives in a world where it's not considered as a job, what other artists need. So what do you stand for as an artist if you had the power to pass a law or to improve the conditions of
less known, or the whole profession? What would you say?
I'm sorry, were you asking like the power of an artist? Like,
No, your
More branding? Like how?
No, what do you complain about as an artist, and what would you change if you could change it?
well, I feel like you can't change anything until you change yourself, because you have to be what you want to see. So if you can't get that together first, then, and this is my personal belief, because I've heard this from a lot of, I respect my elders, you know. I feel like people who have been on the planet way longer than me, who have seen a lot of different things, they could probably help me get to some quicker answers, you know. And so I believe in being the change that you want to see. So anything, like you just heard me ranting about AI and, you know, American culture being so horrendously image driven, you know, and it's kind of how it's hard to be kind of fact based. So I read a lot. I really try to be the person that I would like to see. You know, I think that's my fight. I heard another great saying I love: the greatest form of protest is example. You know, so what I complain about, I try to fix within myself, and hopefully somebody else can see that. You know, because I feel like, and this is what has happened with a lot of artists now, because you don't want to be hypocritical, you know, because you don't want to make, you know, music that fights something else while you do the same thing that you're fighting against, you know. And I think that's been the issue with a lot of artists, you know. It's coming back to bite them now, you know. I've always deeply loved the music and the artistry of the late, great Wayne Shorter. Wayne Shorter was not a protest writer, so to speak, but his imagination was just so vivid. Like, his protest, if you wanted to read into it, you could feel Wayne was complaining that we're not using our brains and our imagination enough. We keep when we write music, we tend to focus on this. And especially if you're a Black artist, people expect you to write about maybe one or two things. And Wayne is like, why are you agreeing with that? Look at all of this, you know. And so I love how he would use novels and superheroes and just these really incredible characters that he would come up in his brain to fight evil, you know. Just start with myself. That's how I combat what I see in the world as an artist. Ooh, the hands are up. Yeah.
Just to go, like, sort of continue off of that question, don't you think the shift we're seeing towards, like, hyper-individualism, both in America and especially in America, but also here in Canada, sort of makes this idea of being the change you want to see more and more antiquated and less influential on the people around you?
Yes. But
and how do you combat
actually, can you give it the mic? Could you all hear this question?
So if you want to use it.
Yeah. That was interesting. Put that in the microphone.
Given the shift we're seeing towards hyper-individualism, especially in America, but also here in Canada, don't you think that this idea of being the change you want to see is becoming more and more antiquated and less influential on the people around you, and that it's going to influence them less to change and improve themselves as well.
I don't believe that, because I think that even in an age of hyper-individualism, if you see something that you can connect with, you'll connect with it, you know. I feel that you see someone or something that's very strong in its authenticity. When I say authenticity, you can tell that that person is comfortable being who they are. And you can tell people who are they're trying things out. I'm not sure who I am yet. That's fine. You know, you gotta do that for a while. That's part of growing, you know. I look at pictures of myself from when I was in my 20s and I'm like, ugh. You know, but that's cool. That's part of the growing process. So I think when you're at a certain point in your life, you are going to be hyper-individualistic. That's just part of the process. But I think what happens now, there's some thing out there that gives you points for that. You didn't get points for it before. You were just like, oh yeah, they're trying to figure it out. Okay, you know, hey, I'll be here when you need me. You know, whereas now it's like, that's right, don't conform, don't listen to anybody. Don't listen to anything. You've got this. Yeah, but no, don't do it. You know, you are your own team. And you know, it's like, well, if you got a million people who are thinking individualist thoughts, how are you gonna come together as a community, as a group, you know? So yeah, it might be harder to kind of influence when you're like that, but I think if you're really trying hard and people can feel your heart, you can still influence them.
Great. Sure.
You talk about when you're playing in another person's band, you're thinking about serving the music primarily, first and foremost. How do you find that balance, if you do, between serving another artist's compositions and serving them stylistically, but also imprinting your own personality and style into that band, or that arrangement?
I've never thought about that. I mean, they hired me. My personality's in the band. I don't have to try to have my personality come out through the music. Plus, in jazz, if you're improvising, if you're making up your own bass line, if you're a drummer and you're playing time, see, that's one of the beauties about playing jazz. If you take 10 different drummers and say, just play time for me, right in this tempo, you're going to hear it play 10 different ways. That is their personality. You don't have to find your personality in a jazz group. It's already there. If you got the gig, your personality's in the band. So I never thought about if, is my voice being heard? Yeah, you're in the band. They can hear the bass. That's your voice. Your voice is being heard. So serve first and foremost. Don't even think about that other stuff.
Thanks.
I feel like this person's had their hand up for a while. Sorry.
I'd like to make a comment about the mentorship that both of you do to young musicians and everything. And I don't know, have you ever heard of a classical double bassist named Gary Carr?
Of course.
Okay, well, he happened to spend some time in Canada in the 60s, going around the public schools, and I happened to be I would think I was 8 or 9 years old, seeing him at my public school. And just the influence in terms of inspiring my involvement in music has been enormous. And so I'm really glad to see both of you. and your wife carrying on with
Thank
that
you.
kind of thing.
Thank you very much. Sure.
As a young musician, and before you talked about separating yourself to sort of create more opportunities and strike from the bunch and become sort of a more unique musician for the sake of opportunities. Especially now in sort of an age of social media and just sort of the music industry shifting in a more technological direction. What might be some ways to separate yourself as a jazz musician?
Did you all hear his question? Yeah. Well, I don't know if I said anything about separating yourself. What I said was, if there's a particular gig that you want, that you know that you want, like, how do you make yourself special for that particular band so you can get the gig, you know? But in the age of social media, as I had a wonderful morning talk with a few students this morning, and yeah, I mean, I find social media as simply a tool that can be used in a very clever or not so clever way. I've seen some musicians do some incredible things on social media. Some I've become familiar, like for example, I remember doing a master class at Michigan State University about 10 years ago, back in 2014. And I met two young female bass players, India Owens and Anissa, I can't remember her birth name, but it was a Muslim name. And a couple of years later, she came up with the professional name of Anissa Strings. And she just would post herself playing the bass and singing along, like just a steady, slow, steady dose of just simply playing the bass and singing. But it looked good, like the aesthetic was really, really good. And you know, first you get a couple hundred likes here and there, and you know, started to slowly build up. And I was like, I kind of like this, you know, like I like her sound, because she wasn't trying to showboat. She wasn't trying to, you know, kind of go for that sort of IG glam look. She just simply played and sang. Good sound out of the bass, good, strong, husky voice. Rihanna somehow saw her IG, retweeted something, and she blew up, right? And what I love about her now that her followers have like quadrupled because Rihanna hooked her up, you know what she does on IG now? Still plays the bass and sings. She every now and then she does something not music related, but more often than not, it's just her playing the bass and singing. And which lets me know that, like, that's her authentic self. That's what she wants to do, you know? And I said to her one time, she's like, she's like a husky Esperanza Spalding. Like if Esperanza Spalding smoked, she would sound like Anissa. So check her out, Anissa Strings, Aneesa, Anissa Strings. I think you'll like her. But she's an example of how to use TikTok, social media. Samara Joy, the wonderful, great jazz singer that's been winning all these awards, she used TikTok in a very clever, wonderful way that, I wish I came up with that, but I don't have the energy to do that. Most people who are successful, here's something to think about. Most people who are successful at anything tend to do it repeatedly. They keep doing it. They keep doing it. Like practicing. You do it over and over and over and over again. So I remember Samara Joy would go on the road, you know, here we are at the airport, you know, here we are at a truck stop, you know, here we are, you know, she would literally take her fans on the road with her. And then it just started slowly building up, building up, building up, building up, building up. And because she went to a popular jazz school in New York, you know, a lot of her classmates were in on it, and her teachers knew, and next thing you know, she's winning, you know, Best New Artist at the Grammy, I think in 2022. Or was it 2023? I can't remember, but she's huge now. So there's all kinds of different ways that you can use social media in the quest for individualism. I mean, it's kind of built in for that, but you could also do it to kind of be and build your own community as well, or be in the existing jazz community, which I think Samara has done extremely well.
Are you playing in Toronto this visit at all?
No, I think I played Toronto in November, and I played in Toronto February before that. I don't have anything on the books this trip, but I'm sure I'll be back soon. I'll never stay away from Toronto for too long.
I want to ask a jazz question.
Please.
So I watched one of your last lowdowns, and you talk about as a young musician wanting to learn jazz, to improve your jazz standards. So you go to Ray Brown, he goes, what are you listening to? And you said, oh, you know, Miles, Coltrane. He goes, listen to the singers. So then you say, so you start listening to Frank and Nat King Cole and Ella, but you never say what it is about singers that allowed you to become a better player of jazz standards. So
Jazz standards are actually not jazz standards, they're Broadway standards. Yeah. All these songs that you think you're burnt out on come from some Broadway show. Now, if I asked you, like, what musical does Surrey with the Fringe on Top come from? Could you answer that?
The Meet in St. Louis?
No. Oklahoma, right. If I asked you to sing the verse to I Got a Crush on You, number one, could you? Two, did you know that there was a verse to I Got a Crush on You? You know, so like there's an entire, see, I hear these jazz musicians, this is one thing I don't like about the jazz community. It's hip to be crusty. It's hip to kind of be like, man, you know, the songs are old, man. Yeah, you gotta do something new with them, man. Yeah, man. I don't want to play them songs no more, man. Like, how can something be old if you actually don't know it? Have you ever tried to play Misty in C? Because everybody plays Misty as a ballad in E flat. Simply playing a song in a different key will give you it becomes a new song real fast. Especially if you do it on a gig. Somebody calls it in the song in the key you're not used to, you're like, uh-oh. Hey, I thought you were tired of this song, you know? You ever try to play Body and Soul or Minor Third up or down? You know, do you know the lyrics to Body and Soul? You know? And so when I started listening to singers, and I started hearing the story behind the melody,